Hi everybody, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about Zen and game development. I almost called this Zen and the Art of Game Development after that book I like, but game development is not an art. I've talked about that it's art and science smushed together. No side trumps the other, so I just want to call it game development. Also, I'm going to talk about Zen, but I want to point out that I'm not religious. Wasn't raised religiously. I call myself secular. But I did take a lot of religion classes my last year in undergraduate school. I mentioned I was an engineer, and I had 6 general education electives, which I had used for things like astrophysics, what an engineer thinks as a hobby. But I was so interested in religion that I used several of them. I took a Greek mythology class. By the way, religious people get kind of upset when you think of mythology as religion, but deal with it. I took a comparative religion class, and then I really liked Buddhism, and I took a class just on Buddhism. I have some of my books from that, but most of them I've lost or given away over the years. And then related to that, one of my favorite channels to watch is a philosophy channel. The host's name is Jared Henderson. I've linked it in the video Why I Don't Review Games. I also have taken one philosophy class. The one philosophy class I took was called The Philosophy of Science Fiction. So basically, we talked about science fiction concepts from a philosophical point of view. My end of the class thesis was on time travel, and I argued that time travel was to physics what dividing by 0 was to math. Once you allow it, that's when you get all these paradoxes. You can prove 1 equals 2 if you let me divide by 0. So the whole time travel paradoxes of shooting your grandfather or being your own parent, all those stem from the fact that you allowed time travel in the first place. Once you get rid of it, all those paradoxes go away. Anyway, so I've had that too. I did have one book I kept. It's called Looking at Philosophy. It's an old book. I don't know if it's still available. It's by Donald Palmer. I love it because it's a great overview of major Western philosophical thought. There's not much Eastern in it, so that's the one downside. And part of the reason I took Buddhism was I didn't have any exposure to it. Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion is very different than Western. And I wanted to get a bit of that before I dove into graduate school and lost myself for years in computer science. And I will tell you, what really resonated me with Buddhism, and especially Zen Buddhism, was there was an underlying principle that some of your experiences are ineffable, meaning you can't really describe them to someone else. Unless you've experienced it, you can't really understand it. And I've had so many experiences like this in my life that I would go into, but it defeats the whole point of what I'm saying is I could describe it all to you, and you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. You have to do it yourself. I've mentioned having a kidney stone. Most people pass them in 1 to 2 days. Mine took 4 months. That was 4 months of pain. When I first showed up at the ER and I didn't know what was going on, a nurse in the emergency room took one glance at me and went, "You have a kidney stone." I'm like, "How do you know?" And she said, "I've had one too." Later, after I got my CT scan to confirm that it was a kidney stone so they could give me some pain meds, she said, she was back at my bedside. She said, "I'll tell you, honey, I've had 3 children. Natural childbirth and one kidney stone, and I would rather have 3 more children than 1 more kidney stone. I know how painful it is." And I was nodding and trying to be polite, but I was just thinking, please give me some Demerol. And then they did, and I was in the floaty clouds. That is as close as I can ever tell someone is, unless you've had a kidney stone, you have absolutely no idea how bad and intense and just agonizing the pain is. And what's interesting is, so I took those Buddhism classes, which were saying that. I didn't have the kidney stone until 15 years later. But the year after I took those Buddhism classes, well, comparative religion and then Buddhism, I was at UCI, and that's when I first discovered Lord of Light, which is, as I've mentioned on this channel, is my favorite book. I've talked about it in a video about influential books. I'll link it below, and I also talked about an RPG I want to make based on Lord of Light. I'll link that below. What's really interesting about this book is there's an entire passage about fire And what the speaker is saying is, unless you've experienced fire, people can describe fire to you all day long. That it's hot, that it dances around like a living thing, that it consumes, that it spreads, it reproduces, that it, all these things. And you think you know what fire is, but until you actually see fire, you really don't know what fire is. I love that passage. It really impacted me. I remember reading it again. When I finished it, I backed up in the book and read it again. So I knew it was impacting me right when I read it. But later on, when I describe the book to people, I don't mention the setting very much. I don't mention the fact that it goes back, that it's nonlinear. What I talk about most is it's amazing, the prose. And I think of that section on fire. And then the other thing I want to mention was I have this book. It's a silly book. It's called Zen to Go by John Winokur. It's full of quotes, Zen quotes from people you don't expect Zen from. And one of the most famous ones is Yogi Berra, the baseball player, not the cartoon bear that ate picnic baskets. But Yogi Berra was once asked about a restaurant, and he famously responded, "Nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded." I had someone say something to me. I had a friend who lived in New York, and she didn't have a car. And when I asked her about it, she goes, "Nobody drives in New York. There's too much traffic." And I just went, that's very Yogi Berra. Anyway, that's the thing that Zen Buddhism got me. It was like this idea that not only things were ineffable, but there were things that you can say that mean something, but they also drive you crazy if you think about it too much. And Zen has that quality of like water, where you can see it, you can feel it, but if you try to grab it, it just goes right through your fingers. And now that I've done game development for 45 years, it'll be my 45th anniversary. And by the time you see this, in like 2 months, I will have been doing it for 45 years. I wanted to talk about 4 different Zen concepts and what they make me think about in game development. It's a fun Friday. I know you've been listening to me ramble so far. I'm going to ramble a little more. The first one is impermanence, and that's the idea that everything changes and nothing lasts. This is true for life. This is true for game development. Techniques come and go. Features come and go. Engines come and go. Trends come and go. Game developers come and go. Nothing lasts, so you have to let go. The worst thing I see happen to game developers who've been in the industry for more than 5 or 10 years is they've latched onto something, and that's all they think about. They only know how to code in one language. They only code in one engine. They basically have a hammer, and everything is to them is a nail. All I can tell you is game development changes constantly. I've been doing it since 1981. Unless you're willing to adapt, don't plan to stay in it for more than 5 or 10 years, because literally everything you learn will be gone. The hardware changed. Techniques to optimize on the hardware different. Trends that people want, design features people want, the detail on design that they want, how they want their designs delivered to them, all that will change. Do not hold on to it. A related one, a Zen concept, is accept, but don't expect. That's the idea that things will just happen. If you start to want things to happen, if you want things to be a certain way, that is a guarantee that you will be unhappy. And even more than that, it means that there's pain out there, there's unfairness, and it's okay to be aware of it. But if you dwell on it, if you focus on it, it will just reinforce it. Accept that it's there. Enjoy the parts you can and don't focus on the parts you can't. If you do that, if you focus on that, it is going to drive you absolutely crazy. Game development isn't fair. I've seen it be unfair to different people. I think it's been unfair to me a few times, but overall, I've had a really good experience. That's what I like to think about, is the really good stuff. And then the bad stuff, I will just tell you about in the sense of, here's some pitfalls you might want to avoid, but don't dwell on them. It can be very stressful making games. People think it's not, but it's incredibly stressful. Just don't make it worse by focusing on all the negative all the time. Be aware of it, take steps to avoid it. That's what I'm trying to help you do here. But if you make that focus on the pain and the suffering the central part of your being, you will just make it worse for yourself and no one else. So please just accept what's happening. Don't expect certain things. This leads us into another Zen thing, which is called mindfulness, which is basically being here right now, which I translate into pay attention to what you are doing. When I'm doing this channel, like right now, I don't really have a script. I have a set of notes so I don't veer too far off topic. But I don't have a script. I don't edit because this is what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to talk to you guys about mindset and game development. There's nothing else on my mind. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do afterwards. I'm not thinking about tasks I didn't finish at work last week. I'm talking about this. There's a famous Zen quote, when you're doing the dishes, do the dishes. Sounds simple, but it really means don't be sitting there scrubbing the dishes going, okay, when I'm done with this, I got to take out the trash and then I got to walk the dog and then I probably should clean up the living room. Oh my God, I want to get to bed by 10 because I got to get to 8. No, do the dishes. Pay attention to what you're doing. Do the dishes. It sets your mind in a very nice, calm, I'll get this done. Then I'll think about what to do next. When I learned how to code and how to design, and I've done both throughout my game development career. And I keep them separate. In fact, it feels like they're on different parts of my head. When I code, I'm coding. I'm not redesigning the game. I am attempting to implement the design that I or someone else made. The time to re-examine it, that is later. Similarly, when I design, I try to think of all the fun things the player can do and what my design goals are and what kind of game I'm trying to make. I'm not thinking of the implementation. Later on, when I write down the design specification, I occasionally will think of the implementation. I do know many programmers don't like me going, hey, this really should be a linked list, or why don't you keep this in a hash array because we have to look it up fast. They don't want that. But if they ever come to me and they're like, hey, I'm about to start this feature, I'm like, okay, yeah, I would have done a hash table for that, but rock on. Basically, be mindful. When you're doing something, do that thing. If you're thinking about half a dozen other things, you're not doing the thing you're doing well, and you're really not doing any justice to those things you're trying to think about. And then the fourth one, and the last one, thankfully, it's called beginner mind. This is interesting to me because I think I've managed to do this even though I've been doing this so long. And beginner mind basically boils down to try to stay curious, try to be open-minded, watch, listen, interact with people, with the games you're playing. Stop judging them immediately based on all your past experiences and just be open to the different possibilities that they may offer. Here's one thing I always ask people in game development and people who play games. How many great games have you missed out on playing because you let someone else tell you they were bad? Someone came to you and go, oh, you don't want to play that game. It has this feature you hate. Okay. Or how many games did you miss out on because you restricted yourself to one genre? It's like, I only play turn-based role-playing games, so I'm not going to play that real-time game, or I'm not going to play that strategy game, or I'm not going to play that card game. You've missed out on so much, and the only person who truly is hurt by this is you. Especially if you're forming your opinion on effectively nothing. I see a lot of people, they form opinions on what they should think about games based on how they see reviewers talk about it. And I've talked about you can look for a reviewer who already agrees with you on past games to help you whittle through the tens of thousands of games that are coming out every year. But ultimately, you should probably form your own opinion on things because relying on other people, it just offsets that judgment. It's hard to explain this in a way. I think young people do this naturally, although I'm beginning to see a lot of young people who seem to very firmly held beliefs with no room for any digression, which strikes me as an older mindset. And I see people get into this, and I just think, how many awesome experiences have you missed out on because you heard about something and immediately tossed it to the side because of something that ultimately wouldn't have mattered and wouldn't have affected your enjoyment in any way? So that's the mindsets that I got out of learning about Zen Buddhism, that even now, 45 years later, I still think of that and how it applies to game development. And it's almost like I don't think about it, I just do it. And that, I think, is probably another important Zen focus. But anyway, that's my Zen for you today for this fun Friday, and I hope you enjoyed it.